Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am so excited to welcome you all to today's EDO Roundtable. This is the fifth in a series that we began last year, right after the pandemic struck, I guess last March. And we are going to be looking again at how EDOs are making sense of all the challenges that we've dealt with. We can add a few more, I think, this week for many of our friends in South Central US. And we'll be talking, of course, about COVID and how we're managing and planning for recovery and all of those things as well. Now, we have two of the three panelists with us that I originally promoted. Before I introduce them, I just want to say a word to our friends in Texas and other parts of the country who are impacted by the winter storm and cold and power outages and all the other things that have been thrown at them. Amy Madison from Pflugerville, Texas was going to join us. She had no power, no Wi-Fi, and she's going to join us for our March EDO roundtable. So we certainly appreciated her willingness to brave the elements, but I think she has other things to focus on right now, and we're looking forward to that. Today with us, we have Keith Lambert, who's the Vice President of Business Attraction with the Lansing Economic Area Partnership in Michigan, and Pete Tesch from the Economic Development Council of St. Lucie County. We're delighted to have you both with us here today. Hello.
Hi, Alissa. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
We are thrilled to have you here. And we have our pinch hitter third panelist, who is my lovely colleague, Stevie Field-Chavez. I am thrilled to be able to welcome her with us today. She's also going to be talking about how we'll be able to, all the colleagues and clients and friends across the industry that we speak to, and we can share some of the things that perhaps you've been hearing, Stevie, from them in the context of all of these things. So thank you, Stevie, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, what I'm going to do is we're going to start off with some presentations from our guests today. And Keith has graciously agreed to go first. So Keith, I'm going to make you the presenter. So you should get a little box up on your screen that lets you share your screen with us today. You could tell us a little bit about what's going on in Lansing and in your corner of Michigan.
Okay, it says I'm showing screen. Are you seeing the presentation or?
We see GoToWebinar, so you may need to click on your PowerPoint on the bottom. Sometimes that'll bring it back up.
Okay. Let's see.
Maybe in the dock on the bottom, if you click on PowerPoint, sometimes that brings it up.
Oh, here we go. Screen 2.
There we go. That's perfect.
All right. Yeah, so hello everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I want to provide just a first few minutes of just kind of giving you context of where we are and what we're all about. So the Lansing region is in the middle of the state of Michigan. We're about an hour from all of the major markets. We often describe ourselves as 90 minutes to 90% of the population. You can get a sense after Detroit and Grand Rapids, we're the largest MSA. We're home to Michigan State University. That's a lot of people know us for that reason. We're a region of about 500,000 people. Our urban city of Lansing is about 120,000 people. So just from kind of a scope of things, we're not super dense, but we go from urban to suburban to rural in about 10 or 15 minutes. So we kind of have the mixed of a mid-sized market outlook. In terms of the industry clusters we focus on, we're really big on insurance services and insurance technology. I'll touch on that a little bit later. We also are very involved in the medical technology space and life sciences more broadly. Some of that's related to MSU, some of that's related to long-time existing industry. For a long time, we have a manufacturing culture that came out of Ransom Eli Olds. He was a contemporary of Henry Ford and launched Oldsmobile, and then that was acquired by General Motors. General Motors still has a couple of their newer facilities in our region. We have one of the big things that helped us through the Great Recession is that when manufacturing was really struggling, we had a lot of insurance companies that were continuing to hire and continued with high wage jobs. And our insurance industry has been growing at over 10 times the national average over the last decade. So that's really been a bright spot for us. And I'll mention kind of how we see that related to with COVID later on. As I mentioned, General Motors is here, two of their newest assembly plants. So they're still a huge part of our overall work culture, and specifically the kind of the background, the history of why we have the manufacturing tenacity and workforce that we do. They make the Cadillac sedans here as well as the Chevy Camaro. And then the other plant makes the Chevy Traverse, the Buick Enclave, and they just announced recently they're going to be bringing back the GMC Acadia, so we were happy about that. But like a lot of communities, you know, we don't want to be a one-trick pony, and I think when a lot of people think of Michigan, they think of the big three and the automotive legacy and maybe being too dependent on a singular industry. So we really focused over the last decade on diversifying our manufacturing cluster, and we've had a lot of success with that. Some of the examples are like Pratt & Whitney, as GM kind of has ebbed and flows over the years. Pratt & Whitney's taken that as an opportunity to kind of cross-train automotive skilled people into aerospace, and they've been able to grow from a couple hundred people up to 700 or so last year. And of course, we are really blessed in our area to have this kind of dynamic duo of Michigan State University and a really strong community college that's a very good technical college as well. Michigan State, they're global in terms of their international student body. And COVID, they took a hit of about 1,000 international students, but it really wasn't as severe as we thought it would be. So that's their number for fall 2020 enrollment of international, and that's a huge piece of their graduate students. And then the engineering is a focus of the entire state of Michigan, having some of the highest per capita engineering numbers in the country. So that's something that's characteristic of our region as well. And then again, LCC with the Center for Manufacturing Excellence is really a tremendous asset for us as well. So I guess what I want to say about kind of pre-COVID is that we had a lot of momentum. We were, you know, kind of a mid-sized market on the rise. We had all this construction activity, and luckily most of that was able to continue. We launched and we were able to successfully recruit the 5th largest company in Ireland, Glanbia Nutritionals, to launch a $500 million project. And that began construction in late 2018 and just wrapped up at the end of last year. So that was a massive construction project that obviously all of us were kind of concerned about with COVID affecting things, but they were able to continue on and get scaled up without too much issue. And then similarly, we had a large scale hospital and cancer center being developed right next to Michigan State. We're one of the few Big Ten communities that don't have the school with a medical school attached to them. So this is finally changing that. So that project was able to keep on, and they'll be opening next year. So of course, and then COVID happens, right? So we have all this kind of momentum built up. We feel like we're doing really well. We're making strides in a lot of the areas we wanted to. And then we get hit with COVID in early March last year, and a lot of restrictions on, you know, economic activities, and then specifically to the state and to our region in the center of the state. I think we've done pretty well overall in terms of our healthcare leaders mitigating the effects, but it's still, you know, even in Michigan, 16,000 deaths and almost 500 just in our own community here. So it's had an effect. I think everyone can relate to that really across the board. And obviously it's affected our economy in a huge way. Our small businesses were just debilitated over the last year, especially our service-oriented industries. So really a big thing that we've been doing, and even we just wrapped up a program last week. This has kind of been an ongoing thing. Every couple of months, we'd have a new grant program devoted to small business relief. And that's really been a huge part of our organizational mission, kind of having to pivot. And we see the you know, healthcare workers kind of on the front lines of the public health crisis, but very much similarly, there's an economic crisis that we're on the front lines of. And these programs are really to kind of put out fires, if you will, and allow companies to survive and get through some really hard, you know, month after month of taking losses. But there's also the reality, you can see just in our area, we had over 5,000 businesses apply, and we were only able to award 800 or so grants. So there's the need is just so massive, and obviously this is coupled with PPP and all the disaster loans and a lot of different programs. But you know, our team definitely stepped up to kind of be involved on this front. And again, just it's kind of like COVID had this effect where some industries were hugely affected and others were able to kind of adapt and move on pretty quickly. Manufacturing and construction, for instance, got back to work quite quickly, but the small business community has really been a challenging 12 months. So we're proud of what we've been able to do over the last 10 months to aid this, and I'm sure a lot of the EDOs around the country are in the same boat. Another thing that we've been really active with the last year is kind of connecting the dots with our healthcare systems and the manufacturers in the area that could pivot to produce PPE or swabs or anything that would be of benefit to the health systems and help them procure those things. So this is just an example of a spreadsheet we put together with some of the manufacturers and kind of connecting dots in various spaces. And the state of Michigan was doing this as well. So I was pretty proud of all the connections we were able to make in getting our health systems outfitted with the right things. A lot of companies we saw shifting their operations entirely. This was a clothing manufacturer out of Detroit that we worked with to get some manufacturers some much needed masks for their employees back in I think this was like late March, early April, so pretty early on in the pandemic. We had a local fashion business that devoted all of their attention to making gowns for the healthcare industry. We had, and I've heard a lot of stories about this, but distilleries shifting operations to make sanitizers. We had a handful of spirits and liquor manufacturers doing that. And then we have like a big company like Neogen, publicly traded food science and animal science company, launching specific cleaning related products to help fight off COVID. So it's kind of been across the board that we were able to mobilize a lot of companies. Dark Container, they're known for owning the Solo Cup brand. They're a big plastics manufacturer. They were able to manufacture and donate a bunch of face shields to our local hospitals. Michigan State University was very involved with working on some different processes to decontaminate the N95 masks, which were in very crucially high demand. We have a company that makes medical isotopes that was actually building new products to help. They built this. Innovated this barrier intubation box specifically to help healthcare providers deal with COVID. So it was a lot, just really inspiring to see, and I think our community rallied around it as many others did, and we were able to get to the point that Sparrow had so many donated items that they ran out of storage room, which was obviously a great thing to move toward. So in terms of thinking about COVID recovery, we kind of have this Michigan Safe Start plan, and I think we're somewhere between 4 and 5 right now. And the idea of like the time when we're going to get to stage 6 and really be post-pandemic is really hard to know, right? And there's been, with the vaccine rollout, there's been a lot of talk about, is it June? Is it September? Is it the end of the year? When are we truly going to be more back to normal? And I think in terms of our pipeline and working with business attraction, which is what I lead for the organization, we really got to this sense of what is the new normal, and I think it's particularly relevant for office users, where we had so many projects that were just pushing pause because enterprise-wide they were deciding, we really need to rethink our whole real estate portfolio, and why do we have as much space as we do, and is it designed properly, and how do we get back to it, with our current workforce, let alone planning new facilities. So I think the office market in general, and a company like Cushman, they're trying to consult on, here, this is how you make your 6-foot office space and how you design it. And, there's a path forward. But I think that was really challenging. We had a couple big call center projects, including a Wayfair project that we were really excited about that fell off. They were our casualties to COVID, which was about 1,000 jobs at pretty good wages for call centers. And we were excited about those. But, that's just kind of how it's been. But at the same time, we've been focusing a lot within our virtual business attraction on knowing that a lot of the site search, site selection activities are going on virtually. And that's, I think, where our work with GIS planning really comes into the fold. And one of the things that we really enjoyed, and that was kind of automatic within GIS planning's Zoom Prospector interface, is that they threw in this 3D look using Google Earth on every single one of our properties. And what we're trying to do is kind of take a next step to that, to doing these custom 360 office tours. And we're really just kind of in the infancy there, but our plan for 2021 is to do a couple dozen, where we're really looking at prioritizing office spaces and industrial spaces in existing buildings. And then we're spending some of our money to do it with the Matterport cameras and getting all that situated, and then becoming a regional hub, working with some of the real estate companies that are already doing that. So this is just an example of what the 360 office tours look like. I think everyone's pretty familiar with this. The real estate world's all over it. And doing 360 office tours is just that next level visual experience, virtual experience for people. So they can go further with thinking about sites and options, not having to make site visits in person. We're also looking at doing 3D building renderings and thinking about industrial sites and kind of superimposing buildings on them. And that's another thing that we have some money budgeted this year. So I think a big focus of ours is trying to, use what we already have and we already have built with Zoom Prospector, and make it better and better. I know we have a nice project layer built into Zoom Prospector that includes a lot of success stories. So we're thinking about creative ways to update that and use other local layers, including we've even toyed around with the idea of our 800 grant recipients for the small businesses, of adding them as a layer. It would take a lot of work, but we're trying to just go further with using the platforms we have. And then we've been really successful. Our industrial pipeline has just been robust throughout, especially the end of 2020. Our pipeline got huge injections, and we're continuing to see that, just a lot of progress there. And some of them are foreign companies. So, you know, I think that's been a real bright spot for us, is knowing that, you know, a company in India or in China can really get as far as they need to go with a level of comfort to make a site location decision and then move forward with the project, even in spite of the ongoing pandemic. And Continental Oceans is a really good example of that. They leased about 2,500 square feet of office space in May of 2020. So just as everything was kind of, you know, the world was turned upside down, they're leasing space and launching their U.S. operations. So there's still opportunity out there in those spaces, and I think, you know, the hand-holding we can do, and the more we can do through the virtual experience, you know, the better we're going to be into the long run. So that was kind of what I had prepared on the front end, and I appreciate being here, and look forward to having more conversation with you all about some of the best practices and what's going on across the country. But I think it's both an exciting and rewarding time to be in economic development, but also incredibly challenging. And you know, we see that there's definitely bright spots, and I think we all see the light on the horizon at this point. But there's still a lot of pain across the economy. And one other thing I want to mention. We created a Department of Equitable Economic Planning, and that is really on the basis of looking at the pandemic and the racial justice movement in the recent years, and understanding that this pandemic has affected different groups of people differently. There's massive disparities in the health outcomes and as well as the economic outcomes. So we're really focused on that, and about 2/3 of our small business grants were to underrepresented demographics, including women and minority groups and veterans and people, persons with disabilities. So that's really a big focus of ours too, and we don't want to let anybody be left behind. And I think the economic development industry is continuing to innovate in that space and figure out ways to create inclusive prosperity. But I think it's definitely one of the challenges of our time.
Wow, Keith, there's so many interesting things that you covered in here. I really appreciate you taking the time to put together the slide deck to walk us through that. As you say, so many challenges, but also opportunities to build back better and make, you know, things stronger and more inclusive. I'm going to reserve my questions for you till afterwards, but I did take a lot of notes, and I appreciate that. Pete, I'd love to hear from you as President of the Economic Development Council, St. Lucie County. I am going to hand the presenter controls over to you. Yeah, to your colleague, Jen. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, we'd love to hear what's happening. Another completely different side of the country. Let us know what's going on in Florida.
Great. Thank you, Alissa. And it's a pleasure to be with you, Alissa and Stevie. We think a lot of GIS planning, and like my colleague Keith, we rely on GIS planning as a really important function of our economic development efforts. Delighted to be with you today, and as Alissa mentioned, due to my technology challenges, I have my intelligent and talented business manager, Jen Dubé, to help me through this challenging PowerPoint presentation. Again, we have a similar scenario that Keith mentioned in the southern part of the United States. So I'd like to kind of give you our story. And Jen, if you would go to the next slide. You see here we have several video clips that support our business attraction and retention efforts, and a variety of different collateral pieces and videos that display St. Lucie County in Florida. And if it's okay, we have a 64-second video on St. Lucie County and the Treasure Coast. And Jen, if you could play that right now, and hopefully our viewers can see that.
does sometimes take a moment to render with GoToWebinar, but
If you could go to the next slide. So just to give you a perspective on where we are, the cities of Port St. Lucie and Fort Pierce, we're equidistant from Orlando and Miami at 110 miles apiece, and our population is about 330,000. So the Florida Turnpike and I-95 intersect our county. We're about 65 miles from Florida Space Coast and about 50 miles from West Palm Beach, to give you some bearings. Next slide, please. Little interesting tidbit, we're located on the Treasure Coast, and just 3 blocks from where I'm broadcasting today on beautiful South Hudson Island. Back on July 31st, 1715, 11 Spanish galleons were sailing back from South America loaded to the gills with gold. And on that fateful evening, 2,500 people lost their lives in 9 of those Spanish galleons. And strewn over the beaches and the coast are tons of gold. So a lot of that was found in the 1960s by Mel Fisher. But out there's still some galleons that have gold. So come down to the Treasure Coast and help find some gold there. Our tourism director said that Johnny Depp came to the Treasure Coast International Airport, but she couldn't confirm it because he wasn't dressed like Jack Sparrow. So, Jen, if you could go to the next slide, please. A little bit about the EDC. We're your garden variety economic development organization. We're a 501c6. We've been in business since 2000. We have approximately a budget of $1 million, and about 65% of that is private sector investment. The remainder with grants and contracts with the county and municipal governments. We have a large board, 35-member board of directors, and four full-time staff and 2 contractual. Jen, next slide, please. You know, a similar story with Keith in East Lansing. We were just basically blindsided by the COVID-19 and the economic repercussions that it had on our economy. As you remember, it was almost a year ago in March where everything shut down. We weren't even sure if our economic development organization could continue financially given all the uncertainty. However, we did leap into action. We began a virtual business recovery center and worked with our Small Business Development Center, Sklar, the Chamber, and our local governments to help small businesses, particularly those that were impacted by the tourism and hospitality industry sector. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have a pretty diverse economy, and we don't really rely on tourism as much as, for example, like Orlando. So even though we were experiencing 18 and 19% unemployment, we thought that we would be able to help some of the small businesses in tourism and hospitality. So, in those dark days of March 2020, we did a lot of outreach. We called a lot of businesses to see how we could help them, trying to get them sorted out and linked with banks, whether it was EIDL or PPP loans. And, even things like trying to link up individuals and organizations and businesses with the food banks to make sure that people got fed. So it was a very organic approach. We did everything that we could to keep our businesses afloat. Similar to Keith, we had an arrangement with St. Lucie County government through the CARES Act, and we put together the Small Business Assistance Grant Program. We had a sub-recipient agreement with the county, and we actually went out and hired 12 to 13 grant review processors and a grant review manager to go through approximately $3 million of grants to the smallest of businesses. So Jen here with me helped us process 351 applicants and over $2 million of grants to the smallest businesses. So we feel proud that we were able to take a very hands-on approach, even though that wasn't in our job description. And the result was our businesses, our investors, and our stakeholders were supremely appreciative of us doing the best that we can to help those local businesses. Jen, if you could go to the next slide, please. So also, as we go into the post-COVID-19 environment, what do we do going forward in the future? We are very much invested in the Strategic Doing Initiative, and that's a smarter, more agile approach to strategic planning. And there's three basic elements that we think are critical to grow the economy and diversify it and see how we might be able to reimagine our economy. Currently, our unemployment rate is about 6.3%, but we know that's higher because people are not looking for work officially. However, with these three elements, we're engaged in updating our skills gap study. And those are the three growth industries of manufacturing, healthcare, and the skilled trades. The other element is entrepreneurship, innovation, and capital access. How do we help companies reimagine, reconfigure, and remodel their businesses, particularly if they were in service, retail, hospitality, and tourism? How do we make sure that we create enough entrepreneurs and small business owners that have sufficient capital to create their businesses? So one thing that we're looking at is a regional loan fund, to a revolving loan fund, if you will, regional revolving loan fund to help in that regard. And then the third element is great places and great properties. How do we make sure that we are a competitively priced community, that it is economically feasible to grow and expand here, and that the permitting and regulatory process is understandable, seamless, and effective, but still maintaining sustainability in a visually appealing environment. Next slide, please, Jen. So we've been fortunate. We've had a lot of great economic activity pre-COVID. We had 34 new and expanding business projects, and in 2020, 6,100 jobs. And so we think this is a pretty good benchmark for a smaller community like ours. Obviously, when the brakes were slammed on with COVID, it was a much different situation. But however, we were very pleased once things got settled down that we were able to reignite the economic development engine. Next slide, Jen. So even in light of the COVID pandemic, we had 8 projects, 3 expansion, 5 new companies, and over 3,200 projected jobs, and with a projected 4.6 million square feet of new industrial and commercial space, which I'll explain in the next slide. So this is very fascinating from an economic development standpoint. Many people don't know where the hell St. Lucie County is, or Port St. Lucie, or Fort Pierce for that matter. Many people know where West Palm, Miami, and Fort Lauderdale are, but you know, we're the slice of real Florida, and there's still ample property, and it's a very affordable place to live. We couldn't give away industrial property 20 months ago. Now the area is really on fire, particularly in industrial and commercial development. And as mentioned in the earlier slide, we estimate that we have about 5 to 8 million square feet of industrial and commercial facilities that are either coming out of the ground or under contract or in the development process. So right now, along with manufacturing, which includes the marine industry, boat manufacturing is really big here in the Treasure Coast. But along with that, manufacturing, warehousing, distribution, and other type of commercial activities, those facilities are in high demand. So with South Florida becoming very crowded, and the lack of property and the high cost of living there and doing business, this is fueling demand. So Florida is the second largest state in the union population-wise. We've hit a $1 trillion economy. And if we were a sovereign nation, we'd probably be the 17th or 18th largest economy in the world. So St. Lucie County is equidistant, as I mentioned, between Orlando and Miami, and we're in the sweet spot with regard to being able to attract this very desirable new development. So, Jen, just to give you a couple of examples of some of that development and where they are. So right now we have 5 major nationally prominent industrial developers in a variety of different spots on I-95 and the Turnpike. Next slide, please. One of the newest one is a Sansone group out of St. Louis, Missouri. They're planning over 3.2 million square feet, and they just got underway on a 250,000 square feet last month. Next slide, please. On Tuesday, the city of Fort Pierce just approved the site plan for the Silverman Group for the Interstate Crossroads Business Center with 1.1 million square feet of industrial space. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm gonna stop right there. I would just like to thank Alissa and Stevie again for having us on here. We're really blessed in, again, a very crazy time where we thought we were going out of business, and now we're seeing unbelievable economic development growth. And I would leave you with this. We're lucky because this is where opportunity meets preparation. So the last 5 years of trying to put together an economic development strategy and get partnerships together to put together a new blueprint for economic vitality. It's amazing when people work together and a game plan is actually executed, that you can build your economy and improve the lives of the residents and families that live here. So I'm honored to work for the St. Lucie EDC. And again, it's a pleasure to be with you all. And Alissa, I'll stop there and shut up. And if there's questions, we'll take them during the Q&A format. And Jen, thank you for making it happen for me.
You're welcome, Pete.
Thank you so much, Pete. That's fantastic. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate you also taking the time to walk us through that and put together a look at the challenges that you've had, at the opportunities. It's definitely a theme that I'm hearing, both of those things being bound up in your experiences here. Again, I took some notes here. I do have some questions for you, but Stevie, I would love to hear from you. Maybe you speak with economic developers everywhere on a regular basis. What kind of things would you like to share about some of the things you've been hearing from friends, clients, colleagues across the industry?
Well, I think for what I've been hearing is very similar to what we've heard today. It's really just, and if I had a drink right now, my rule is if you hear the word pivot or new normal, you have to drink. So just imagine us all doing that. But it's how economic development organizations have pivoted or changed the focus in what they were doing into what now needs to be done. I'm curious for the panelists, that's actually one of the questions I have. I think that would be really helpful. What did your first couple of weeks look like when everything started to shut down? I mean, I know there was a little bit of shock because I think we were all a little bit in shock of just how is this happening? We have nothing to pull from in our lifetimes. So, but what did your time look like with as far as it was for economic development?
I can jump in on that, Pete. I think for us, you know, it definitely was shock, and there was just this immediate helping of immense uncertainty about what the next week would look like, the next month would look like, let alone trying to plan any further than that. And no one really had any concept of how long this was going to last. I think a lot of us, you know, we were kind of shut down, and we went virtual. We've been virtual since the second week of March, 2020, almost a year now. And when that first happened, the discussion was, you know, we're hoping to reopen on May 1st. You know, like there was really no idea of how long and how deep this would be. And again, like if some industries, our first few moves were to initiate that the first small grant program we started like the next week, and the state of Michigan rallied 20 million in funds pretty quickly. So that was us in the Lansing area giving about 600,000 out. But that was painful because we were only able to award 3% of the applicants. You know, and that was just at the time that PPP and EDO were being launched. So we were trying to provide technical assistance on what those programs were and how to apply for them. And then on the other side of things, we had, like Pete was talking about, we had done a lot of kind of visioning and planning around building up our MedTech cluster. And we created this MedTech advisory group that was bringing together the health systems with government officials, with MedTech manufacturers. And the head of health sciences over at Michigan State University was our co-chair. And he reached out to us like as soon as everything kind of hit the fan in March with COVID and said, you know, this group can be a great platform for us to have real-time discussions with the healthcare leaders and understand how we can help them. Because at that point, we already knew PPE. The PPE shortage was huge. You know, March through May, that was really a big focal point for us. So connecting dots and finding suppliers for the health system locally, because all the supply lines to China were all cut basically. So I mean, those were really the two big things we were focused on in the early weeks, was that small business grant program, and then what we called MedTech mobilization, helping the supply chains of our health systems. But it was hectic. It was hectic, and you know, our pipeline in over the last 12 months, our pipeline was actually less effective than I thought it would be. But again, like the pain was with the small business community. Mid and large size companies have generally weathered the storm pretty well, I think, and because they had more capacity, more resources to weather it. And you know, they weren't operationally affected by all the restrictions like retailers and restaurants were. So it was kind of like a tale of the haves and have-nots. For some people, it was inconvenient. For other people, it was devastating and potentially life-ruining. Yeah, or you know, life-ending. For obviously, there were a lot of actual deaths related to the pandemic. So it was a wild time.
Thank you.
Stevie, you know, our story patterns very closely with Keith and East Lansing, and maybe a smaller fashion, but I just like to reemphasize kind of the human element of this. You know, we were all shut down, and you know, our EDC kept waiting. Well, you know, somebody's going to step up to the plate and do something. So there was crickets. And I don't mean to laugh, but it's like, you know, somebody needs to step up and help the business community. And, you know, we were scared, and actually we didn't have a clue what we were going to do. But, you know, we just started to try to reduce it down to things that could make help. And, you know, even something so simple as a phone call, and, you know, trying to determine if businesses were essential and non-essential. We got, you know, obviously we were helping businesses, but it was like, you know, wow, you're the only people that called us, you know, for weeks or months. You know, we were the only lifeline. So, you know, we fashioned our staff to make calls and to do outreach. Like, for example, our investor development or membership development person, she just made calls all day. In fact, we secured the business disaster assistance survey respondents from the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, the state agency, and you know, there was probably a couple hundred hurt businesses on that list. But we found out nobody ever touched that list. Yeah, I mean, it's like, wow, nobody called us, but we were so grateful that the EDC called to see how we could help.
Yeah.
So, you know, just roll up your sleeves, and we're going to take a leadership role on this and do the best that we can.
Well, I think that's the definition of a true leader, is someone who you see a need and you go in, and there's no map. There's no guidebook on how to go out and do this. I can't imagine of anything that could have been written before that gives us a step-by-step instruction on getting out there. But in the end, I think you find yourself so much closer to the businesses that are in your community, because they understand what a resource you really are and how much you're working and fighting for not only information, but connections, resolution, any type of way to help the business succeed, survive, I would say, you know, in a situation like this. Obviously unprecedented, and we're all still navigating through it. It's been fascinating to watch economic development organizations find their way through it, and to find out what will be written in manuals to come. You know, I imagine this will be an EDI class at some point. It's just how to get through this, because this has not been something that I've ever been part of a class on this before. Not even pandemic related, but something that was so, it wasn't thought of. No, none of us could imagine it.
Well, that's an interesting point, actually. We had Leanne Hackman-Carty, who does disaster preparedness and recovery for IEDC, spoke with us last year. And one of the things she says is, when you're thinking towards a disaster, you're putting together a plan of like, who are your other people that you will remain in contact with? Who will you reach out to? Nobody anticipated anything like COVID. I mean, this was just completely, took us all by surprise. And I'm really interested if both of you in your presentations talk about different people you reached out to, lists you drew from that nobody had looked at before, and that element of collaboration with medical manufacturing groups, with people at the university, with people at the state level, with people at the utilities. I'm interested to hear more about that collaboration, and whether you think that you're going to continue for, like, has this been helpful to you? Or are you going to continue forward with these new linkages that you've made? What does that mean going forward? And also thinking back to, you know, more disasters are just going to happen. I mean, we only have to look at Texas right now. Things happen. So just having this kind of, to use an old metaphor, a Rolodex of a list of places where you might go, other organizations, institutions, community groups, leaders that you can work with to get through that. I'm just interested in those thoughts.
I'd say on that front, you know, with that MedTech advisory group was just kind of like dumb luck that we had already kind of convened this group of all these right stakeholders. But I think what we found with that is it was a lot of the manufacturers, they wanted to participate, manufacturers that had nothing to do with healthcare or medicine, right? And like Dark Container was a good example. Like they make Solo cups and other plasticware. Like they don't make any medical products, but they were the first stepping up to say like, well, we have all this capacity, and our manufacturing shifting regardless, and like we want to help. And there was just so much this like outpouring of support, and then they would say, oh well, we know this other company that can do that part, and this is where we can design engineer it, and this is how we can get through like the FDA portion of it. Like everyone was just kind of like problem solving real time. And I think people were excited by it, like we really saw it as like this is a trying time in the community in the world, and like we're figuring these things out, and I think that was it definitely kind of stimulated some relationships and strengthened some relationships that were there before for the most part, but it's not to the same degree of like everyone has a common enemy and its name is COVID type thing, and people were really good about coming together. And the first couple manufacturers that came out with like get back to work plans, like Magno was one of the few in Michigan, and like that plan got shared all around the manufacturing councils and to everybody of like, this is how a company can do this. And like everyone wanted to kind of help each other. And I feel like the traditional competition kind of ceased for a little while, and it was really much more of an authentic like help thy neighbor type approach, which is refreshing and a break from a lot of the national discourse that we've had over the last year. I feel like communities really, people came together across communities and did amazing things. And we're still trying to figure out how to really tell that story effectively, because beyond the people that participated, and the few news articles that came out about it, there's not that much positivity. And if any of you are familiar with that Some Good News that the guy from The Office put out, I mean, I loved that so much because it was a dark time. Thinking back to April, and I mean, April was the worst economic month in U.S. history in terms of the deep drop in the unemployment rates and everything, the job losses. So I think it was we were kind of a bright spot for a lot of people, and there was definitely the death and despair as the backdrop, but we were doing some really cool things, and to a certain degree saving lives, but even more so keeping families financially solvent and keeping people's jobs to the greatest degree we could. And that's I think that was really important work, and everyone respected it that way. And like Pete said, the volunteerism that we saw with the small business grants, we had all sorts of people scoring and reviewing those things. I mean, everyone was like lining up to be part of that, and like take 8 hours of their day to go through a very lengthy application scoring process. People loved it. They loved it. So like, I think it was, in that way, it was really inspiring. And I think it's a reminder of why we do what we do in this profession. And it's about helping people always at the end of the day. And, businesses and developers, it's all kind of a means to that end. And, we were able to step up, and that was really, really great to see.
Alissa, if I could add on to Keith, and he's spot on, and it may be helpful to our participants. We engaged in a business response and recovery plan with our county from a business perspective. So obviously we're in Florida, and we have to worry about hurricanes, and all our plans are based on, inclement weather or some related incident. But this plan is actually a pandemic related response plan. And, talking about plans is in the same category as talking about mowing the lawn or watching paint dry. So I won't go into any elaboration of that, but I do think it's important that business development organizations work with their local governments on what's the business response portion to the private sector to do this. And we have a pretty good game plan now that our consultants helped us along with Jen put together. And if anybody wanted to look at that, we're happy to share that document. So that's one thing. And the second thing, kind of going back to the dark days of the pandemic, as Keith mentioned, one thing that we thought was very valuable is that, along with the Chamber and the Small Business Development Center and SCORE, we also had a nonprofit organization stakeholder call every couple weeks. That
Mm,
included United Way, the Salvation Army, the Boys and Girls Club, the food bank, the health department, and our municipalities. And the purpose of it was really just to share resources. Again, who had food, who had water, who could help with transportation, childcare. The Early Learning Coalition was in there to help with a variety of different childcare activities. So, I mean, okay, is that economic development? I don't know, but certainly the EDC took a lead of getting these diverse groups together just so everybody could talk and share resources and assets with the individuals and the businesses out there in our community.
I love that. That's a really good task force oriented approach. And those are groups, yeah, they're not traditional economic development partners, but in this moment, it was, daycare and child services was huge. That was a big issue why people couldn't work. They couldn't be effective working at home, whatever the case.
Yeah, no, I think those are great examples actually, because when crisis hits, we go back to the food, water, shelter, safety. We need to get those things sorted first. Then we need to start triaging the other things. And the small and medium-sized businesses, certainly, as you say, they're debt averse. They don't have cash reserves to last more than sometimes a few days or a week without any revenue coming in. So just having the record of that, I'm hoping that in many communities that there is this kind of debrief as we emerge into this recovery phase and move on, so that there is a kind of lessons learned, that we maintain these contacts and this awareness of who else in our community we can connect with when the impossible becomes possible and actually happens. I just want to steer us over, because you both talked and I was actually really glad to hear that about new investment coming in, new projects. There is this perception that foreign direct investment, that investment from other places, even within the US or North America, has either slowed or stopped, and clearly it has not. So I'm really encouraged to hear about the developments that are happening in your area. I'm just interested in, what are the strategies that you have? What do you see coming up, let's say in the next couple of quarters, in terms of doing that outreach and working with investors who can't always get on a plane and come to your communities?
Keith?
Yeah, I think, we've really continued to lean on our site location consultant relationships. We've continued in the state of Michigan, the MEDC has been active with having kind of market blitzes and very nicely done online events like mixers, and getting the governor, lieutenant governor involved to speak with the site consultant community. And we've had, again, a pretty steady stream, almost exclusively in industrial. We've definitely seen a slowdown in office user type projects, but it's those relationships, keeping those strong, and then our prospecting work. A lot of the work I do internationally is done via Gazelle. So we have targeted countries and regions of the U.S. and then industries that we kind of dig into. So I've been going through those lists, and we've had we have a pretty active digital advertising campaign going on in the med tech space. I'm looking particularly at the coast and then Western Europe, and those have been creating some nice leads for us that I've then been following up with. And then our existing industry has really been pretty explosive, especially manufacturers. Like a number of projects where a company that employs a few hundred people is talking about doubling their footprint, and particularly in that med tech space, our biotech, our medical device, our pharmaceutical companies. Every one of them that we work with is in growth mode right now. We're working through expansion projects. So I think those are, just some of the things. That the pipeline is in pretty good shape. Business attraction is harder though, because you can't get on a plane and go to a trade show in Europe or China, and our FDI and our sales missions that we used to do internationally have all ceased, and it's hard to really cultivate relationships just via emails and electronic back and forth and Zoom meetings. So I think the leads that were already cultivated, we already had relationships with, we're focusing there. And the new lead, the true new lead generation and qualifying leads, that's been a little bit more challenging. I think we're going to probably put some more emphasis on that this year. But yeah, I mean, I think we were just lucky that our pipeline was pretty solid going in, and some of those early leads have now gotten to the point they're prospective projects, and they're moving forward this year.
Thank you. Pete, what about you guys?
Alissa, and Stevie, I'll tell you a funny story, but again, we rely on GIS planning, and kind of like Keith, we've upped our game in terms of our website, video clips, visual presentations, industrial property databases, and doing virtual tours. Obviously, site location consultants, they want real stuff. So when we can tell them, hey, we have this coming out of the ground, we've got space for you, this is what we have, that's what they want to hear. But something just, another interesting tidbit is that Port St. Lucie is the poster child for incredibly colossal failed economic development projects. Several years ago, we had a $40 million incentive package for digital domain, working with the state of Florida and also our local governments, that went dark. We also had the Vaccine, Gene, and Therapy Institute, $125 million project, go dark. And $65 million of that was debt incurred by Port St. Lucie government. We've had a civic center and another biotech institute almost go dark. So, literally, $150 million of debt for failed projects. So, the last 6 years, we've been trying to get that yoke off of us. And if you saw in the video clip, Cleveland Clinic has purchased most of our hospital systems in the Treasure Coast. So we've got this world-renowned hospital system now here in St. Lucie County in the Treasure Coast. And if you know the Cleveland Clinic, they have the Lerner Research Institute in Cleveland that's doing life science and biotechnology research. So they've leased the $65 million, 117,000 square foot state-of-the-art biotech lab, and we're making it's fabulous. So Lerner Research Institute has this is their only other facility besides in Cleveland, where they have 1 million square feet. So now they're doing immunotherapy and research on COVID. So with that, the Florida International University has partnered with one of our other biotechnology firms, Torrey Pines Institute for Molecular Sciences. So now FIU, Cleveland Clinic, and now they're talking about bringing their medical school up here. So we're making a big turnaround where we had just not 2 but 3 big black eyes, and being able to have a successful economic development partnership and outcome where we were cast aside as the redheaded economic development stepchild.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it's turning around and that you've got that move in the right direction. MedTech certainly important industry right now, and there's a lot of investment in those areas. So that is good news. And actually, both of you had mentioned virtual tours and the importance of kind of using that, since you can't get on a plane and do those things anymore. So I just wanted to show something quickly that you talked about Matterport earlier in your presentation. Just the option that any additional, we've got this 360 virtual tour using Google Earth, but any additional custom tours that you have can be added to any property with Report. This is an example from Matterport, so that you can take people on these, the walk through the building. If you can't actually come in a different way, at least you kind of get a chance to go and see those things differently. So just so that you're aware that those things are option. I think we have another example here, client who has used another kind of, I think they're Langley or Rico tours, that lets you walk through buildings and do these kind of immersive interiors in different ways. So I think you're right. It is challenging, but certainly still possible to be able to do that kind of, providing that information, albeit in a different format. So if you have those things, then you could definitely build them into the property reports that you've got as well. Stevie, is there anything else? I think we've come to the end of our hour, but if there was anything else anyone wanted to add or say just to close us off here.
Alissa, I have something. If Stevie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go.
In today's USA Today newspaper, there was actually an article on economic development, and it's COVID-19 offers remote workers and small communities big economic opportunities, and it's a great article by Bill Esterly, who was the one of the founders of Craigslist, but talking about attracting remote workers to your communities aside from the companies. But it's in today's USA Today, and I think everybody would find it an interesting read.
Check that out, yeah. Excellent. Yeah, thank you. That's I didn't see that one. That's one to check in on. Any closing words of advice or thoughts that you want to share as we move forward, hopefully into recovery phase? No one knows exactly what it's going to be, but hopefully we're looking up.
I would just say, the feds are doing a great job through the EDA and some other programs that are offering funds. Go after those funds, and really, our community is in the midst of exploring the economic impact of COVID-19, and I know a lot of it seems obvious to us, but really digging into the story beyond the unemployment figures and some of the nationally available data, I think, is important for all of our communities. Because again, there is this kind of haves and have-nots and this left behind that are still really, really in rough shape, and I think that's something that we're trying to pay special attention to, and they're often kind of left out from traditional thinking about incentives and whatnot. So it's just a really important thing to do. And then also focusing on the virtual experience, and GIS planning has really helped everybody. All their customers do that kind of innately with the Google Earth stuff. But I think the more you can help site location consultants and industry executives that are looking at your community know things and visually see things virtually, that's going to be, it's just going to help them go further with their due diligence and get closer to making that decision to locate in your community.
Great, thank you. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy work days to join us and to share what's happening in St. Lucie County and the Lansing area. Stevie, thank you again for joining us. It's always fun to work with you. And I want to thank all of our participants also for taking time out of their days. You will get a link to the video recording of this by tomorrow. Be safe, everyone, stay well, and thank you for the work that you're all doing for your communities to help ensure that businesses are able to survive this and move us forward, hopefully into a better era. With that, I wish you all the best. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye all. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.